Hello, my name is Benjamin Harrison Allen, and this is the webcast, The College Experience, Lessons Learned, in which I want to share the lessons I learned during my 4 years at college. But first, let's start from the beginning. The pediatrician, who clearly didn't know much about autism, told my parents they would probably have to institutionalize me. My parents said that wasn't going to happen. They gave me the help and encouragement I needed to address my challenges and succeed in school. But the pediatrician wasn't all wrong. I did end up in an institution, the University of Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Now, I said I had help and encouragement along the way, but the road to UMW wasn't easy. In school, social pressures were hard enough for the neurotypical students, but it was worse if you had Asperger's syndrome. Add to that the impetuosity and concentration challenges of ADHD, and I often felt like I had no control. I was introduced to Virginia's I'm Determined program when I was 16 and continued with it for 5 years. The I'm Determined staff was caring and knowledgeable about helping students with disabilities succeed. They gave me the confidence and direction I needed to set goals for my life. I wanted to go to college and major in military history, and I did. But it is the lessons I learned along the way that I want to share with you today. Now, this comes as a shock to many freshmen and their parents, but especially to students with disabilities who often count on their parents to be their advocates. After you turn 18, privacy laws prevent the university from discussing any of your issues with your parents unless the student gives explicit written permission for the school to do so. The choices for clubs and extracurricular activities on campus could keep you busy every waking hour. I was interested in, if not excited about, many of them, but with ADHD, it takes me twice as long as most students to get my work done. So I simply chose to be in a few. I ended up joining a Civil War reenactment club and the local chapter of the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, which did some service work in the community. One of my favorite activities was attending the university's Great Lives lectures in the spring. Therefore, my suggestion is to pace yourself until you know what you can handle. Know thyself. Now, about roommates. In my freshman year, I didn't know anyone to request a roommate. So the university, doing its best to accommodate my preferences, assigned me someone whose primary interest was lacrosse. And he sleepwalked once, in the nude. I remember waking up one night with this naked guy pulling the cables out of my computer. After that experience, I sought out a roommate for my sophomore year. It turned out that we were simply incompatible. I got frustrated with his complaining about the sophomoric drama in his life, and frankly, I don't think he knew how to respond to me. Finally, in my junior and senior years, I hit gold. I would like to call out my friend and roommate, Viraj, in case he is watching this. We liked and respected each other. We were both kind of quiet and committed to our studies. Our suite mates also had similar personalities. Having a good situation in the dorm definitely influenced my studies. It's much easier to succeed without unnecessary distractions. You face choices every day in college, even in choosing what you eat. I remember a situation where my mom accidentally put $300 for my books in the wrong account, my university debit account. Upset when she realized what she'd done, she told me to spend it on something I really need. I didn't hear the really need part. When she later visited my dorm room and found a mountain of empty pizza boxes under my bed, I told her I had indeed found a way to spend all of the $300. I really needed pizza. If you have a disability, checking out the school's Office of Disabilities is just as important as evaluating its academic program. The Office of Disabilities can be your anchor, especially if you are having issues with your professors. I had a professor who gave us very complicated directions. To make matters worse, she had to change the syllabus schedule mid-semester. I was confused and submitting assignments at all the wrong times, which was bringing my grade down even though I was doing the work. The disabilities office would not speak to the professor, but a counselor mentored me on how to deal with the situation. Several email exchanges and a visit to the professor's office later, I learned how to take control of a difficult situation. My point in sharing this is that in college, you have to learn to advocate for yourself, a concept that I'm determined had really instilled in me. Now, this may be the most important thing I talk about today to high school seniors with disabilities preparing for college. I learned it the hard way. Don't think that providing your high school IEP and testing records is necessarily going to get you accommodations when you arrive as a freshman. When I arrived at school, I was told I would need recent testing results, something I could have requested in high school before I graduated. But I didn't know that. Instead, my parents had to hire a psychologist to administer the necessary tests over Christmas break freshman year. In the meantime, I received provisional status. The kind of accommodations you can expect depends upon your disability, of course. In my case, I got extra notes and extra time for tests. The notes were actually taken by another student who was assigned to provide me with a copy. I didn't always take advantage of the notes, but I definitely needed the test time. The way the professors learned about my accommodation was through a letter prepared by the disabilities office. It was my job to personally present them to the professor and discuss their implementation. I always tried to do this as quickly into the semester as I could. Something I especially appreciated from the disabilities office was getting the opportunity to register for classes early. Class registration is a stressful process, a mad rush really, because there is a hierarchy to it. Upperclassmen get first dibs, and then the selection process proceeds down the line by year and grade point average, limiting the choices as the slots fill up. Some disabilities already affect or limit your choices, so it's helpful to have this early registration before everyone else. By the way, one of the best pieces of advice the disabilities office gave me before I started UMW was to get a LiveScribe Smart Pen. The disabilities office had some loaners, but I was fortunate to get one of my own. It was one of the best investments I ever made. While you take notes with it, The pen is also making an indexed audio recording of the professor's lecture so that when you are later reviewing your notes, you can link them to exactly what the teacher was saying at that time. This was an absolute lifesaver for me. Half of one's success in college is showing up on time and paying attention. That's not hard to do when you have enthusiastic, interesting professors, which we fortunately had a lot of at the University of Mary Washington. They weren't as interested in the facts we learned as much as they were in what we could do with the information. In other words, they taught us critical thinking. They valued our opinions. The process changed me from a goofy high school kid into a well-informed adult who can contribute something of value to society. This is not to say that it's an easy ride, far from it. The school demands that you hone your writing and speaking skills through specific courses. It also creates well-rounded individuals, which means you are required to take courses on your weakest subjects. Mine being math, unfortunately. I suggest that you save those hard requisite classes for a recognized community college's summer semester. I found it much easier to succeed when you aren't competing for time with 3 or 4 other demanding courses. If such classes are unavailable, visit your professors constantly. I was so busy trying to keep up with academic demands at UMW that I had less time for a social life. I was friends with my suite mates, and I made friends in classes, but I did not socialize as often as others. I suppose that having Asperger's syndrome, I had some insecurities about my social skills. However, most colleges and universities need to examine how they sensitize their faculty, staff, and students to a disability that is on the rise and will be far more prevalent in the coming years. I must applaud UMW for what they have done in their efforts to promote diversity. For instance, they offered a freshman seminar called Autism in Contemporary Film and Literature that I took and enjoyed. But they need to do more in terms of education. Let me tell you a personal story that illustrates the need for greater understanding and compassion on college campuses. One evening, I was in my dorm room when I heard pounding on our door. It was a campus policeman. The officer said a complaint had been made against me. I couldn't possibly imagine why. He said, in essence, a young woman had reported me for creeping her out, quote, end quote. She was in one of my classes, and I thought she was very nice. Suffice it to say that while I was socially inept, I didn't commit a crime. Even the woman in question conceded as much. This seemed unfair. I needed an advocate, so I called my dad, and he drove to the school the following day to go to the dean's office with me to find out the disposition of the case and to make sure I didn't have a police record. Rather than point a finger of blame here, I hope that others with Asperger's in the future will not have to suffer such indignities as having the police pounding on their doors. Did this mar my college experience? It's not something I'll forget, and I rather prefer not to think about it, but overall, it was a great 4 years. I'm a much different person than I was before I left for UMW as a freshman. The university instilled in me a worldview that will serve me well for the rest of my life. I'm not certain what direction that will be. I'm considering a graduate degree in military history, but thanks to several UMW theater and arts courses, I'm also considering careers in one of those areas. For now, I'm a volunteer at the United States International Council on Disabilities in Washington, D.C., working to build up my resume for a full-time job. What I've learned is that anything is possible, regardless of the challenges of my disability, as long as I remain determined. Thank you, and if you have any questions, you can ask them on the webcast.